Good evening. You've arrived at a quiet place for rest. There is nothing you need to solve tonight, nothing you need to understand clearly, nothing you need to remember. This is a calm science story, told slowly. It is designed to remain in the background. You don't need to follow every sentence. You don't need to stay focused. If your attention drifts, that's perfectly fine. If you stop listening altogether, that's fine too. Tonight's topic is simple and distant. It's about how life began on Earth, not as a mystery to uncover, not as a story with a dramatic beginning, just as a quiet description of what science understands so far, based on observation, based on evidence that has been measured and studied over time. There will be no speculation here, no hidden meanings, no ideas meant to surprise or impress. Only well-established scientific understanding, shared softly, without urgency. Right now, your body already knows how to rest. Breathing is happening on its own. Your weight is supported by the surface beneath you. There is nothing you need to adjust or improve. This voice isn't here to guide you anywhere. It's here to stay steady and predictable, to create a quiet environment where nothing is required. If sleep arrives at any point, that's expected. If it doesn't, there's no problem. Nothing in this story depends on an outcome. The information doesn't build toward a conclusion. It doesn't rely on sequence. It continues at a calm, even pace, whether you are listening or not. Some parts may fade into sound. Some sentences may blur together. Pauses may feel longer than usual. That's intentional. The goal here isn't to hold your attention. It's to allow your nervous system to settle without being asked to do anything at all. Everything you hear tonight moves slowly. Nothing happens suddenly. Nothing needs a response. As the story continues, the details will remain gentle and uncomplicated, and over time, they'll matter less and less. For now, it's enough to be here, resting, listening if you want to, not listening if you don't. The science will unfold quietly in the background, at the same unhurried pace as the natural processes it describes. There's nothing else to prepare for. The night can continue exactly as it is. As you continue resting, there's no need to change your position. If your body feels comfortable where it is, you can allow it to remain still. Breathing is already happening on its own. There's no need to guide it, no need to slow it down or deepen it. Each breath arrives, and then it leaves, without effort. You may notice the surface beneath you, supporting your weight evenly, doing the work of holding you in place. There's nothing to balance, nothing to hold upright. The muscles in your face may begin to soften, not because you ask them to, but because there's no reason to hold tension right now. The small muscles around the eyes, the jaw resting without being held, the tongue settling naturally in the mouth. There's no instruction to relax, no step to follow. Your nervous system already understands how to move toward rest when the environment is quiet and predictable. The shoulders may feel heavy, not pulled downward, just supported. Your arms are where they are. They don't need to be placed a certain way. They don't need to be symmetrical. They're simply present, resting along with the rest of the body. If there's any tension remaining, it doesn't need to disappear. The body doesn't require complete relaxation in order to rest. It only needs safety and time. Your chest rises and falls gently. The rhythm may change slightly from moment to moment. That's normal. Breathing adjusts continuously without asking for permission. Lower in the body, the abdomen moves with each breath. There's no need to hold it in, no need to control it. It responds naturally to pressure and release. Your legs are supported by the surface beneath you. The weight of them is already being carried. There's nothing to keep steady, nothing to maintain. The feet don't need attention. They don't need warmth or sensation. They can remain quiet at the far end of the body. As these physical sensations remain steady, the brain begins to notice the lack of demand. There's no task waiting, no response required, no change expected. This is often when mental activity starts to slow, not because it's being forced to, but because there's nothing pressing to react to. Thoughts may still appear, fragments of the day, images, unfinished sentences. They don't need to be pushed away. They don't need to be followed. They can pass through the mind the same way sounds pass through a quiet room. Present for a moment, then gone. If your attention drifts away from these words, that's completely fine. The body doesn't require constant input. It responds just as well to consistency and tone. The voice you're hearing isn't here to guide you somewhere specific. It's here to remain steady, allowing your internal systems to settle at their own pace. There's nowhere else to be, nothing else to prepare for. The night doesn't require readiness. You can continue resting exactly as you are, breathing, supported, unchanged. The body already knows how to do this. As the body remains settled, attention often becomes less focused on individual sensations. It may feel more spread out, less fixed on any single point. There isn't a clear moment when this shift happens. It tends to occur gradually, quietly. In the natural world, many changes happen this way. Not all at once, not with clear beginnings or endings. Time itself often moves like this, especially when measured over long spans. On Earth, most processes unfold slowly, so slowly that they're easy to miss when viewed up close. Landforms change over millions of years. Oceans shift their boundaries gradually. Atmospheres evolve without announcing each step. From one moment to the next, nothing seems different. But over time, those small changes accumulate. The Earth has always existed within this kind of rhythm, shaped not by sudden decisions, but by continuous physical processes acting over long periods. There was no single moment when the planet became what it is now. No sharp line separating one state from another. Instead, conditions adjusted slowly. Temperature, chemistry, the movement of water and rock. These changes didn't require coordination. They didn't respond to observation. They continued whether or not anything was paying attention. The body is familiar with this pace. It evolved in environments shaped by repetition and gradual variation, not by constant urgency. Because of that, slow and predictable patterns often feel safe. They don't demand quick responses. They don't signal that something needs to be done. When thinking about the early Earth, it helps to keep this sense of time in mind. Not minutes or hours, but spans measured in millions of years. On those timescales, change doesn't feel dramatic. It feels steady. Processes begin. They continue. They overlap. Some conditions become more common, others fade. There is no single frame where everything suddenly looks different. only a long sequence of small adjustments. In science, this kind of change is often easier to describe than to imagine, because it doesn't fit neatly into a story. There is no main event, no turning point that stands out, just continuity. As these ideas settle in the background, there's no need to picture specific scenes, no need to visualize landscapes or early oceans in detail. If images appear on their own, they can pass naturally. If nothing appears at all, that's just as fine. What matters more is the sense of duration, of time moving without hurry, of conditions shifting without intention. The voice continues at a steady pace, not to guide attention, but to provide something consistent enough that the mind doesn't need to stay alert. This is often when thinking becomes less linear, less concerned with order or sequence. Details become less important. The overall rhythm becomes more noticeable. As the story moves forward, it will continue to follow this same pace. Slow, even, uninterrupted. There is no moment you need to notice closely, no point you need to remember. The process unfolds on its own, just as it always has. When scientists describe the early Earth, they rely on physical evidence, rock layers, chemical signatures, patterns that have been measured and compared over time. Based on that evidence, Earth formed about 4.5 billion years ago. Not all at once, but gradually, as material in the early solar system came together. At first, the planet was very different from what it is now. Its surface was hot, its interior was still settling. Energy was released as material accumulated and adjusted. Over long periods of time, the planet began to cool. Not evenly, not quickly. Heat continued to move from the interior toward the surface. This process is still happening today, though much more slowly. As temperatures changed, conditions on the surface changed with them. Solid rock formed in some regions. Other areas remained unstable. Water began to play an important role. Evidence suggests that liquid water appeared on Earth relatively early, not in one place, but across wide areas of the surface. This water did not arrive suddenly. It accumulated over time, from multiple sources. As water collected, it interacted continuously with rock and atmosphere, dissolving minerals, transporting material, creating new chemical environments. The atmosphere at that time was also different. It did not contain large amounts of oxygen. Instead, it was composed mainly of gases released from the planet's interior and from impacts with material from space. These gases created a surrounding layer that changed gradually, reacting with sunlight, reacting with the surface, adjusting as conditions evolved. There was no stable atmosphere at first, only a shifting mixture that settled slowly over time. Energy was present throughout these environments, in several forms. Sunlight reached the surface, providing a steady source of energy during the day. Heat from within the planet escaped through the crust, especially in areas where the surface was thinner. Chemical reactions themselves also released energy. Whenever substances interacted, energy was absorbed or released according to physical laws. None of these energy sources were focused in one location. They were spread across the planet, acting continuously. These conditions did not work toward a goal. They did not aim to produce life. They simply followed the rules of physics and chemistry. Over time, the surface of the Earth became more varied. Different regions developed different combinations of temperature, water availability, and chemical composition. Some areas were relatively stable for long periods, others changed more frequently. This variation mattered not because it caused anything to happen suddenly, but because it allowed many processes to occur at once, in parallel. There was no single environment where everything took place. Instead, many environments existed side by side, each shaped by local conditions. From one moment to the next, these places may have seemed unchanged, but across long spans of time, small differences accumulated. The planet did not pause between stages. There was no clear boundary between an Earth without complex chemistry and one where chemistry became more intricate. Conditions shifted continuously, gradually, without instruction. These early environments did not require observation. They did not respond to attention. They remained active whether or not anything noticed them. From a human perspective, this scale of time is difficult to grasp. But for the planet, it was simply the pace at which things unfolded. There was no urgency, no deadline, only ongoing physical processes interacting over long durations. As these conditions persisted, they provided a stable background for further change. Not dramatic change, but slow accumulation. The details of this accumulation are not important to hold on to. What matters more is the setting itself. A planet with water, with energy, with chemistry taking place continuously. This was the context in which more complex processes could occur, not because they were planned, but because the conditions allowed them to happen. The story does not move quickly here. It doesn't need to. These early conditions remained in place for very long periods of time. And as the night continues, there is no need to track each detail. The steady presence of these environments is enough. Before there was anything that could be called life, there was chemistry. Not complex chemistry, not organized systems, just simple substances interacting under stable conditions. Water was present across much of the early Earth, and wherever water exists, chemical reactions can take place. Water allows molecules to move, to meet, to separate, to interact repeatedly over time. Many of the basic building blocks used by living systems today are simple chemical compounds. They are not rare, they are not fragile. Carbon-based molecules, for example, form naturally under a wide range of conditions. Carbon can bond in many different ways. It can form long chains. It can form rings. It can combine with hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, and other elements. Because of this flexibility, carbon-based chemistry tends to produce a wide variety of molecules. Scientists have found simple organic compounds in places far beyond Earth, in meteorites, in interstellar clouds, in laboratory simulations that recreate early planetary conditions. These findings suggest that such molecules do not require special circumstances to form. They emerge wherever the physical conditions allow them to. On the early Earth, simple molecules were continuously forming, breaking apart, and forming again. This happened without direction, without selection, without preference. Chemical reactions follow basic rules. They move toward states that are more stable under the surrounding conditions. Energy plays a role in this process. Sometimes energy is absorbed, sometimes it is released. Sunlight, heat, and chemical gradients provided ongoing sources of energy. This energy did not guide reactions toward complexity, it simply made reactions possible. Over long periods of time, some combinations of molecules occurred more often than others, not because they were useful, but because they were more stable in the environments where they formed. This kind of repetition matters, not because it creates intention, but because it allows certain structures to appear again and again. In science, this is not described as progress. It is described as accumulation. Molecules that form frequently tend to be present in higher concentrations. Molecules that break apart easily tend to be less common. No choice is involved in this process, only probability. Some environments favored certain reactions, others favored different ones. Near sources of heat, reactions occurred more quickly. In cooler regions, they occurred more slowly. In areas where water evaporated and returned, concentrations changed over time. Drying and rehydration altered which molecules interacted. These cycles did not aim toward any outcome. They simply repeated. As they repeated, chemical diversity increased. This does not mean life was present. It does not mean systems were alive. It only means that chemistry was active, persistent, and varied. The early Earth did not distinguish between important reactions and unimportant ones. All reactions followed the same physical rules. Most combinations of molecules did nothing lasting. They formed, they separated, they disappeared. But because time was abundant and conditions were stable over long periods, these interactions continued, again and again. This steady background of chemical activity did not require observation. It did not depend on being noticed. It unfolded quietly, across oceans, across surfaces, and within small pockets where conditions remained similar for long stretches of time. At this stage, there was no boundary between chemistry and environment. The two were fully intertwined. Water, minerals, energy, and molecules formed a continuous system. Nothing here needed to be remembered. Nothing needed to be tracked. What matters is the pace. Slow, repetitive, unremarkable. This is the foundation on which later complexity could appear. Not suddenly, not deliberately, simply as a continuation of the same physical processes. As the night continues, there is no need to hold on to these details. The chemistry described here does not rush toward change. It remains steady, ongoing, present, and that steadiness is enough. Over long periods of time, chemical activity does not remain perfectly uniform. Even when the same basic rules apply everywhere, small differences in environment can lead to different outcomes. Temperature varies slightly from place to place. Water levels rise and fall. Minerals interact with nearby substances. These variations do not create direction. They create possibility. When simple molecules interact repeatedly under similar conditions, some combinations appear more often than others. Not because they are favored, not because they serve a purpose, but because the surrounding environment allows them to persist a little longer. In science, this persistence is not described as success. It is described as stability. Some molecular structures are more stable in water. Others are more stable when surfaces are present. Some persist longer when energy is supplied gradually, rather than all at once. Over time, these small differences matter. Not quickly, not dramatically, but through repetition. Molecules that remain intact for longer periods are more likely to encounter other molecules. They are more likely to participate in additional reactions. This does not imply intention. It does not imply growth toward life. It simply reflects how probability works over extended time. In certain environments, simple molecules can organize themselves into larger structures. This does not mean they become alive. It means they form patterns that are still governed by physical laws. Scientists describe this process as self-organization. This term does not imply awareness. It does not imply planning. It refers only to the tendency of matter to form repeating structures when conditions remain consistent. An analogy is sometimes used here. Like patterns forming in sand under repeated waves of water. The sand does not choose its shape. The water does not aim to create a pattern. The pattern appears because the same forces act again and again. In the same way, chemical systems exposed to steady conditions can develop recurring arrangements. These arrangements can be simple: layers, boundaries, clusters. They are not alive. They do not reproduce. They do not respond. They are still chemistry, but they demonstrate something important. Complexity does not require instruction. It can emerge when basic components interact repeatedly under stable conditions. On the early Earth, there was no shortage of time for this repetition to occur. Millions of years passed with similar environments remaining active. Reactions repeated. Structures formed. Structures broke apart. Most of these changes left no trace, but occasionally, certain arrangements persisted long enough to interact further. Again, this does not mark a transition to life. It marks a gradual increase in the variety of chemical structures present. As variety increases, interactions become more numerous. Not because systems are advancing, but because there are simply more ways for molecules to encounter one another. This process does not speed up suddenly. It does not reach a threshold that must be crossed. It continues at the same pace, quiet, incremental. From one moment to the next, nothing seems to change. From a wider perspective, complexity slowly accumulates. There is no boundary here that needs to be noticed, no point where chemistry becomes something else. Only ongoing interaction, repeated countless times under familiar conditions. As these ideas settle into the background, there is no need to hold on to the details. The specific molecules are not important. The mechanisms do not need to be remembered. What matters is the rhythm. Simple components, repeated interaction, stable conditions, long time spans. The same pattern returning again and again. And as this rhythm continues, it provides a quiet foundation for what comes next. Nothing urgent, nothing sudden, just continuity. At some point in Earth's history, chemical systems became more complex than simple reactions alone. There is no single moment that marks this change, no clear boundary where chemistry suddenly became life. Science does not identify a specific instant when life began. Instead, it describes a gradual transition, one that likely unfolded over very long periods of time. Researchers study this transition by looking at what living systems require at a minimum. Not purpose, not awareness, but basic functions. For example, the ability to maintain internal conditions, the ability to use energy from the environment, and the ability to make copies, even imperfect ones. These features did not appear all at once. They are thought to have emerged in simple forms through incremental steps. Based on current evidence, many scientists think that early systems were much simpler than modern cells. They may have consisted of small collections of molecules working together within loosely defined boundaries. These boundaries are often described as simple membranes, not complex structures, not controlled barriers, just thin layers of molecules that naturally form in water and tend to separate an inside from an outside. Such membranes are not alive. They do not regulate themselves. They do not respond intentionally. But they can create conditions where certain reactions occur more often inside than outside. This separation matters, not because it creates life, but because it allows chemistry to become more localized. Within these small environments, molecules interact repeatedly with the same nearby partners. Over time, this repetition increases the chance that certain reactions will continue. Another focus of research involves molecules that can make copies of themselves. Not accurate copies, not reliable ones, just chemical processes where a structure can help produce another structure similar to itself. This does not imply design. It does not imply intention. It describes a process where some arrangements naturally lead to more of the same arrangement under specific conditions. Scientists refer to this as self-replication. Here again, the term can be misleading. It does not mean reproduction in the biological sense. It means that chemistry, under certain conditions, can produce repeating patterns. Some of these patterns persist longer than others, not because they are better, but because the surrounding environment supports them. When energy is available and when materials are present, these simple systems can continue operating. They do not grow, they do not adapt consciously, they simply persist until conditions change. Over long periods of time, systems that persist longer are encountered more often. This does not require selection in the biological sense. It reflects probability over large spans of time. Scientists study these ideas using laboratory experiments and computer models. They test whether simple systems can maintain themselves temporarily, whether they can form boundaries, whether they can repeat certain reactions. These studies do not recreate life. They explore plausibility. They help identify which pathways are consistent with physical laws and observed evidence. Importantly, no single model explains everything. There are several widely discussed models. Each focuses on different aspects of early chemical systems. They are not competing stories. They are tools for understanding parts of a long process. What they share is the absence of intention. No model requires foresight. No model assumes a goal. All rely on the same principles: chemical interaction, energy flow, and time. A great deal of time. On the scale of a single night, these changes are unimaginable. On the scale of Earth's history, they unfold slowly and continuously. There is no moment here that needs to be noticed, no threshold that must be crossed consciously. Only a gradual shift from chemistry that changes randomly to chemistry that persists locally for longer periods. This is as close as science comes to describing the earliest stages of life's emergence, not as an event, but as a process. And even this description remains incomplete. What matters for now is not the details. It is the pace. Slow, incremental, unhurried. As the night continues, there is no need to hold on to these distinctions. The process does not accelerate. It does not announce itself. It simply continues, quietly, over spans of time too large to feel. By now, there is no need to keep track of what has been said. Nothing here depends on remembering details. The ideas introduced earlier do not need to be held in place. They do not build toward a conclusion. They do not require understanding. The processes described continue whether or not they are followed. The early Earth remains as it was. Water is present. Chemistry continues. Energy moves steadily through the environment. Nothing accelerates. Nothing changes direction. These processes do not respond to attention. They are not affected by observation. They repeat. they persist. At this point, it's no longer necessary to listen closely. You don't need to notice where one sentence ends and another begins. Words can remain as sound, moving at a steady pace, without forming clear ideas. Pauses may feel longer. That's intentional. Time may begin to feel less structured. Minutes do not need to be counted. There is no sequence to follow. The body remains supported. Breathing continues without guidance. There is nothing new to anticipate. Nothing unexpected is about to happen. The same themes may return gently, not to reinforce meaning, but to maintain rhythm. Chemistry continues interacting, slowly, without urgency. Patterns repeat. Conditions remain stable. These statements do not require further explanation. They remain true whether or not they are considered. This is a point of permission. Permission to stop following the story. Permission to let attention drift. Permission to sleep. There is no advantage in staying awake for what comes next. The pace does not increase. The information does not become more complex. From here on, nothing depends on awareness. If sleep arrives now, nothing is missed. If awareness fades and returns later, it can drift again just as easily. There is no correct way to experience this moment. Some nights, rest arrives quickly. Other nights, it arrives in layers. Both are normal. The body does not need instruction. The mind does not need reassurance. The steady rhythm is enough. The voice remains consistent. The tone does not change. There is nothing to prepare for. From this point forward, the story does not move ahead in the way stories usually do. It stays. And in that steadiness, sleep has space to settle quietly, without effort, without needing to be noticed at all. Over very long periods of time, some chemical systems remained together longer than others. Not because they were designed to, not because they were moving toward a goal, simply because the surrounding conditions allowed them to persist. These early systems were extremely simple, nothing like modern cells. They did not have complex structures. They did not carry detailed instructions. They were small, loose, temporary. But they shared one important quality. They could continue operating for a time without falling apart immediately. In science, this is sometimes described as the earliest form of a cell. Not a finished structure, not a living organism as we know it, just a small region where chemistry happened a little more consistently than in the surrounding environment. Inside these regions, reactions repeated. Energy moved in, materials moved out. There was no control, no regulation, only interaction. Changes within these systems were extremely slow. On the scale of minutes or hours, nothing noticeable happened. On the scale of thousands or millions of years, small differences accumulated. Some systems lasted slightly longer. Others broke apart more quickly. This did not mean improvement. It did not mean progress. It reflected stability under local conditions. When a system persisted longer, it was simply present for more interactions. That presence mattered over time, not because it was chosen, but because repetition increases likelihood. Most changes led nowhere. They appeared briefly and then disappeared. A few arrangements remained, not permanently, just long enough to be encountered again. This process did not move forward in steps. It did not pause between stages. It flowed continuously. The earliest cellular forms did not spread quickly. They did not dominate their environment. They existed quietly, alongside many other chemical systems. Over time, Earth's surface continued to change. Temperatures shifted slightly. Water moved. Minerals interacted. As environments changed, some simple systems continued to function. Others did not. Again, this was not selection in the modern biological sense. It was compatibility between chemistry and environment. The pace remained slow. Even when simple cells existed, nothing dramatic followed. Millions of years passed with only gradual change. From one generation to the next, differences were minimal. From a wider perspective, diversity increased slowly, not because systems aimed to become complex, but because time allowed variation to accumulate. At this stage, life did not reshape the planet. It did not alter the atmosphere significantly. It did not spread rapidly. It remained small in scale, localized, easy to overlook. If someone could have observed Earth then, they would not have seen a clear beginning, only continuity. Chemistry interacting with chemistry. Systems forming and dissolving, occasionally persisting. This quiet persistence is important, not as a milestone, but as a reminder of pace. Nothing rushed, nothing announced itself. The earliest forms of life, as science understands them, did not arrive with impact. They blended into the background of ongoing physical processes. And because of that, they did not require attention. They did not demand awareness. They simply continued as conditions allowed. As the night goes on, there is no need to hold on to these distinctions. The difference between chemistry and early life does not need to be tracked. What remains is the sense of slow change, of systems adjusting without urgency. That rhythm continues, evenly, quietly. As these early systems remained present, time continued to pass at a scale that is difficult to sense. Years became thousands. Thousands became millions. Nothing marked these transitions. There was no signal when one period ended and another began. The same basic processes continued, chemistry interacting with chemistry, energy moving through matter. The pace did not change. Small variations accumulated slowly, not enough to notice from one moment to the next, only enough to matter over very long spans. Repetition played an important role. Not repetition with intention, just the same interactions occurring again under similar conditions. When environments remained stable, processes repeated. When environments shifted, some processes adjusted, others faded. This did not happen all at once. It unfolded gradually. From a short perspective, everything looked the same. From a longer perspective, subtle differences emerged. These differences did not announce themselves. They did not form clear stages. They blended into one another. The earliest living systems, as simple as they were, continued operating quietly. They did not spread rapidly. They did not transform their surroundings. They remained small, localized, and easy to overlook. Most of the planet remained unchanged by their presence. Water continued to move. Rock continued to shift. Chemical reactions continued everywhere. Life did not interrupt these processes. It existed within them. Over long periods of time, this coexistence persisted. Life adapted only in the most basic sense, by continuing when conditions allowed, by fading when they did not. There was no direction guiding this process, no preference for complexity, only continuity. The same patterns repeated: interaction, persistence, change occurring slowly. On a human timescale, nothing about this feels active. But on a planetary timescale, these repetitions matter. They allow stability to develop. They allow systems to remain present long enough to vary. Even then, change remained gradual. No sudden expansion, no dramatic shift, just ongoing adjustment. The Earth itself continued to change. Continents moved slightly, oceans circulated. Life remained part of the background, not yet shaping the planet in noticeable ways. This long period of quiet persistence lasted far longer than any dramatic chapter that followed later. And because of that, it does not lend itself to a story. There is no moment to highlight, no turning point to remember, only duration. As these ideas repeat, they no longer need to be followed closely. The details are no longer important. What remains is the sense of time passing without urgency, of processes continuing without instruction, of repetition creating stability without awareness. That same rhythm continues now, evenly, without interruption. And as it does, there is no reason to stay alert. Nothing here requires attention. The pattern has already been set, and it continues, quietly, on its own. Nothing in the process has changed. The same conditions remain in place. Water continues to move. Chemistry continues interacting. Energy continues to flow. There is no shift in direction, no increase in pace. The systems described earlier do not require attention to continue. They are not affected by whether they are noticed. They do not pause when they are ignored. They repeat because the conditions allow them to repeat. This repetition creates stability, and stability allows rest. The body responds well to this kind of steadiness. When nothing unexpected is happening, there is no need to remain alert. Breathing continues without instruction. The body remains supported. There is nothing to monitor, nothing to check. Thoughts may still appear. They do not need to be examined. They can pass without being followed. The voice remains present. Its role does not change. It does not introduce new ideas. It does not ask for understanding. It simply maintains the same rhythm. The same statements may return in slightly different forms, not to reinforce meaning, but to maintain consistency. Processes continue, slowly, evenly. They do not speed up. They do not slow down. Nothing important is happening, and that is enough. When the environment remains predictable, the nervous system does not need to stay prepared. There is no signal that something new is about to occur, no cue that requires a response. The repetition itself is the reassurance. The early Earth continued quietly. Life remained small and gradual. Change unfolded slowly. These facts do not need to be held in mind. They remain true whether or not they are considered. Listening can become effortless here. Words no longer need to form clear ideas. They can soften into tone, into rhythm. If awareness drifts away, it does not need to return. If it returns briefly, it can drift again just as easily. There is no correct level of attention. The steady repetition is sufficient. Nothing more is required. The rhythm continues. Nothing changes. The same steady patterns remain in place. Water still moves. Chemistry still interacts. Energy still flows quietly through matter. There is no signal marking the passage of time, no clear boundary between moments. The voice remains present, but it does not ask to be followed. Words arrive, and then they pass. Sentences do not need to be completed. Meaning does not need to be formed. The space between them is enough. Breathing continues on its own. There is no need to notice it. The body remains supported. Nothing needs to be held. Nothing needs to be adjusted. If sleep has already arrived, the story continues without being heard. If awareness returns briefly, it can drift again just as easily. Nothing here depends on attention. The processes being described do not change when they are not observed. They do not slow down. They do not hurry. They continue at the same pace they always have. There is no conclusion waiting, no final thought to reach. The night does not move toward an ending. It simply unfolds. The repetition remains gentle. The tone remains even. Words are no longer carrying information. They are only carrying rhythm. That rhythm does not need to be understood. It can exist quietly in the background, like distant motion, like slow cycles that do not announce themselves. Nothing more is required. The night continues, the motion continues, and the quiet remains.